Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to put together this cartoon style composite inside of Photoshop. If you want to follow along, I have included all the assets that I used in a link in the description of this video. Go ahead, download those, and then let's dive into Photoshop. All right, let's go to File, Open, and in the Assets folder, if you did download it, you'll see some files here. We're going to start with this Jacob Rosen file and go ahead and open that. And this is the first one we're going to do. I'm going to go onto the Select Subject tool and just make a square around him. And then let's go ahead and hit Select and Mask. Let's put this on Overlay. And let's just take a look here. So it looks like this did a pretty good job. I do see it missed a bit of the shirt there. So let's go and just put on our brush tool here and just add this that it missed. And maybe a little bit here also. Basically, you just want to get a good selection. And the first step really is you want to separate your subject from the background so that you have a clean background plate and a clean subject plate. Now for this image, it's relatively straightforward. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to do Command J. That'll put him on his own layer, and we'll call him Original. And next thing I want to do is just cover up the background where he was. Now, for this image, obviously we have a pretty clean background plate. We don't need to do much, but in other images, you may have a more complicated background. And the trick I'm going to show you here will work on even the most complicated backgrounds. So that's to hold down Command, click on your subject. Let's go ahead and move this down here. I prefer to have this pinned, so I'm going to pin this. And then if we go to this brush here, we can go to Expand Selection, expand that by 10 pixels. That just makes sure none of him is outside of the selection. And then if we select our original, turn off this top layer, so we're just selecting that background, and then click on Generative Fill, leave your prompt empty and hit Generate. And what this should do is it should look at your background and just fill in that space with what perceivably would be there. And the advantage of this is as you resize or move your subject around, you don't have to worry about it not lining up perfectly with the former background. Okay, so here you can see we have a few options. This one looks pretty good. Or maybe even the first one. You are seeing a little bit of a shade of where he used to be. And again, because we have such a clean background here, I may just replace that with, a gradient. So I could go onto my gradient tool here, go on Classic Gradient, make sure I'm on foreground to transparent, hold down Option, just select the sky color here. I'm going to select kind of this darker gray part of the sky here, and then just gradient that out, and then maybe go a little bit lighter and add a top gradient so it looks more like our original. But there you go. Now he's entirely separated from his background. The next steps we're going to do is change the size of his head, his hands, and his feet. And that'll create that kind of cartoon look. If you look at cartoon or comic strips like Calvin and Hobbes, Smurfs, or Garfield, you'll see that the characters have disproportionately large heads and also disproportionately large hands and feet. And that kind of helps create that cartoon effect. So let's go on to our original layer. I'm going to zoom in here, and I want to select the head right around the chin line. That's where you want the head to be. You don't want this neck to be made bigger. You kind of want a big head on a small neck. So let's go to our pen tool. Let's make sure it's on path. And I'm just going to draw a path around his chin. So we'll just go here. And outside of him, I don't care where that selection goes because he's already separated from the background. So just like this. And then we'll just make sure this selection goes all the way around like so. And then I'm going to right mouse click, make selection. And here you can add a 0.1 feathering. That's just going to make your selection a tiny bit more anti-aliased. So let's hit OK there. And then I want to cut this from him, but I do want to keep an original. So I'm going to go ahead and just make another copy of this. And then I'm going to do, instead of Command J, Command Shift J. And what that's going to do is when it cuts it and puts it on its own layer, it's actually removing it from the layer below. So now that I've done that, I can do Command T for transform, make sure I have my anchor point turned on, and I want to move that to where I want the sizing up to happen from. So that'll be kind of right down here where his neck is connecting, not quite at the neckline because otherwise you'll start getting holes here, but just above, basically where that neckline would be below his chin. So right about there. And then we can hold down Option so it scales from that point and start making this bigger to what we think looks good. Kind of the bigger it is, the more cartoony it looks, but you don't want to go totally overboard. So I would say somewhere between 150 and 200 is the sweet point. Let's try making this one 180. Okay, and then we're basically going to do the same thing for the hands and feet. So let's go back to, we can call this one cut up, because this is the one we're going to cut up. And let's go back to our pen tool, zoom in here. And again, I want to make sure I'm grabbing the hand from where I want it to expand from. So right about the wrist line there. And then we'll go right in here like so. And then when we're past the boundaries of him, we can just kind of make it go big. Make selection again, hit return, and then Shift Command J, Command T for transform. Bring this down to right about where I want it to become bigger. So maybe just above this line there. And then here, I usually want to make the hands not quite as big as the head. So maybe 150 in this case. And right away, you can see that's starting to have that kind of comically proportioned, those comic proportions. So let's select our cut up layer again, go back to our pen tool, and we're going to go right in here. And around here. Just like that. Make a selection, Shift Command J, Command T, bring this down to right about where I want the scaling to happen, and then let's put in 150 up here. And then let's go ahead and do the shoes as well. So here, go back onto our layer here, go back onto my pen tool with P, and just go around like this. And then here, kind of want to grab just the shoe because I don't want his ankle to be really big. I just want his foot to be big. So right about there. And then we'll go make selection again, Shift Command J again, Command T for transform. And here I want the transform to happen probably right about here. And then we'll do 150. And now this is one where we're going to have to do a little bit more just to make sure we don't have this seam there. I'm just going to turn on my warp and just kind of click and drag right around that area where I want to make sure it's covering his existing ankle. So something like that. And then let's go ahead and do the other shoe. Now, if you don't have this auto select on, which I suggest you don't have that turned on. So let's turn that off. If you hold down Command, you'll temporarily turn it on, and then you can select that back layer and then let go of Command, and you'll now have the right layer selected here. I'm going to go P for the pen tool and cut out this shoe. And we're going to do the same thing here. Right mouse click, make selection, Shift Command J, Command T, bring this right about there, I think. And then let's make this 150. And here I may actually want to rotate it a bit because I have my anchor point there. It's going to rotate from that anchor point, which is what I want. So maybe something like this. And then I probably need to bring in this part of the shoe. So let me turn on my warp again. Just kind of bring in the shoe like this. And we do have a little bit of an odd line right there. I'm just going to go on to my eraser tool for this. So on my eraser, and just get rid of this and kind of smooth out this lace right there. So something like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now I can take all these layers that make up the subject here, put those in a folder, and we can call this subject. And then now I can hit Command T for transform, kind of adjust this to how I want. Maybe I want to make them bigger, smaller, what have you. Now, because they're all kind of one layer group, I can do whatever I want. The last thing I might want to do here is just to make this background a little more interesting. I'm going to go File, Open, and in here I have a PNG of some confetti. I'm just going to cut out these, make sure I don't have any edge ones selected. So any that get cut off on the edge, I'm just not going to select. And then I'm going to do Command C for copy, and then underneath my subject, Command V, kind of make that a little bit bigger. Just add a little bit of interest to our background there. And then maybe I'll do hold down Option to make a copy as I drag this up above subject. I'm going to do Command T, make this one bigger. Make sure there's none over his face. And then I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and just make it look like these are kind of in our foreground, out of focus there. Maybe even a little bit bigger. And that just gives our image a little more depth and a little more interest there. Maybe turn that a little bit. So something like that. And there you go. Those are the basic steps. So now that you know the basic steps, you can kind of repeat them with any image. So let's go File, Open, and next I want to open up this Devon file. And here we have another character. He's kind of jumping up. I find that these images always look best when you have your subject doing something kind of dynamic. So just standing still is not as interesting as doing something like this. So let's go ahead and go to our object selection tool. I'm going to make a selection around him. Let's hit Command Q, see how our selection did. Looks like it did a really good job. I'm going to hit Q again to go back to my selection. I'm going to do Command J, and for this I kind of want a more interesting background. So right above my background, I'm going to go File, Place Embedded. And in this folder, I've got this Phi Bellin from Unsplash. I'm just going to place that here. And let's go ahead and make that a bit bigger. About there. And the next thing I want to do here is I just want to add a little bit of a shadow on the ground so that it looks more like he's bouncing. Now you can see that the light is kind of coming from here. So his shadow should be somewhere around here. Let's go ahead and just make a elliptical shape where we want the shadow to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a curve adjustment layer, just pull down the top of that and the middle, but just a tiny bit in the middle. And so something like this. And then with my mask selected, I want to add a little bit of blurring to this. So I'm going to do a motion blur first. And I just want to spread this left and right. And then I'm going to go blur and now do a Gaussian blur. So something like that. So good enough. I can also just move this around now if I feel like it should be a little bit more this way. Okay, so now let's go ahead and call this one original. I'm going to do Command J to make a copy, turn off my original, and let's call this one cut up. What you call these really doesn't matter, but just for keeping our file organized here, we're going to do that. And then let's go to our pen tool again. And here he has a beard. I'm going to show you a cool little trick you can use to get a better cut out of the beard. So here again, you want to go on the jawline. You want to make sure you don't select the neck because that's going to look bizarre. Do right mouse click, make selection. And here with my cutout selection, I'm going to go to select and mask and just turn up my edge detection. And if I hit, or if I put this on black and white mode, you can see now we have kind of a more interesting selection of our beard there. So let's hit OK. And then do Shift Command J. That'll put this on its own layer, and we can call this head. I'm going to do Command T for transform, put this just kind of where his neckline would be. And then let's go ahead and make this 180. And already that's looking pretty cool. Another thing you might want to do is kind of liquify the face to give the face itself a little bit of those cartoon proportions. Now, actually, in my Photoshop masterclass, I have a whole lesson on doing caricatures. So I would recommend, if you're interested in this, doing one of those, doing that course. But just some quick and easy ones here is cartoons usually have really big eyes. So let's go ahead and make the eyes quite a bit bigger. And then also the forehead is bigger. So, you know, cartoon proportions are very similar to baby or child proportions. If you look at a child, you'll notice that their forehead is usually much larger than an adult's forehead. So something like that. And also sometimes the face is kind of scrunched up. So we can use this, make this a bit bigger, and just make his face a little bit smaller and then move it down a little bit as well. So just move that down. That'll make his forehead a little bit bigger too. And we can even make his forehead a little bit bigger still, like this, and that'll give it a little bit more cartoon kind of comical proportions there. You can see the before and the after. All right, and then we need to do his hands and his feet. So here you can see we kind of want to go right below the wrist line there. So let's go P for our pen, and I'm going to go right about here. Right mouse click, make selection, Shift Command J, Command T, move this down to right above the seam line. And then let's make this, let's say for this one, 140. I think 140 is a little too much. Let's do, yeah, let's do 135. I think it looks better. So, oops, what happened there? Actually, let's do 130. Yeah, that looks good. All right, then this hand. So again, if I go V to go into my move tool, hold down Command, I can select that original layer and then cut out this hand. Now here, I don't want this part. Just think if the hand was by itself, where would be kind of the natural place where it would separate itself from the wrist. So right about there. And then we'll do make selection, Shift Command J, Command T, and this one we'll do kind of right about there, and then we'll put in 135. That looks good. All right, and then let's do the feet. So again, V, Command, click. Here, I'm going to separate kind of right below here. So because of the way his pants are kind of covering the bottom here, what I want to do is just separate the shoe right at the pant line. So right about there. And I want to do these separately, otherwise we'll have a big gap between them and they won't line up with the leg anymore. So right mouse click, make selection, Shift Command J. But in this case, I want to put it underneath the leg. So Command T, let's move this to about here. And then let's start making this bigger. And this is one where we are going to have to do some adjustments with our transform. So let's turn on our warp there. Just kind of move the bottom of this so that it's being covered properly here underneath the pant leg, because I don't want to make the pant leg bigger. So something like that. Now it's underneath that pant leg. All right, and then let's select that layer again, go back onto our pen tool. And for something like this, where it's like not very long, I could probably just stick with the lasso tool. So hold down Option, and then just do a few clicks here. Doing the lasso tool is obviously a little bit faster than the pen tool, but you can't do curves. So you kind of have to decide, do you need curves or not? If you don't need curves, then you can use the lasso. If you need curves, I would suggest sticking with the pen tool. All right, let's do Shift Command J, put this guy underneath, Command T for transform. I want it to get bigger from right about there. Let's do this 135 again. And I'm going to zoom out because I may need to just move this up to separate it from that shoe there. So something like this. Okay, now we can take all these layers that make up our character, put them in a group with Command G, call this subject. And now obviously we have the freedom to move him around, transform him any other way that we want. So there you go. That's another example. One final example is this one. And here, where her head divides from her neck is not quite as clear. So figured I can show you how to do this. Also, as we make her head bigger, this hand is going to kind of disappear. So again, the first step is always separating from the background. So let's go to our Select Subject tool, select her from our background. We can do Q to see how that did as far as the selection goes. And it looks like it did well. We may want to go into Select and Mask, and just in this area here, use our edge detection tool and kind of paint over there. There you go. All right, otherwise that looks good. Let's hit, oh, also right here. There you go. And here. Okay. All right, let's hit OK. We're going to do Command J, and because this is such a boring background, I'm going to go File, Place Embedded, and I'm just going to grab this Seth Doyle image, and let's go ahead and make that bigger. Let's do something like this. I don't really want these characters here. I'm going to rasterize this layer and then go to my spot healing brush, I guess. Just kind of draw over these characters to get rid of them. And also this shadow line. And that right there. Good enough. Okay, so now let's take her. I'm going to do Command T for transform, make her a little bit bigger and centered. And now let's call this original, do Command J. I'm going to call this one cut up again. And here you can see kind of where her jawline is, and that's really where we want the head to get bigger from. So let's go to our pen tool and let's start drawing kind of from here, where her jawline is, to here, and to about there. So that's where we want the head to divide from the body. And I do kind of want this hair inside my head, meaning I want that hair to get bigger. So I'm going to select the hair. I'm going to try to avoid selecting the rest of this neck here. So maybe something like this. And then I'm going to do right mouse click, make selection. I'm going to do Shift Command J, separate that, and then do Command T for transform. Put this kind of right about there, and then hold down Options, start making this bigger. So I think there looks kind of good. I'm going to move this up, so right about there. Now we're going to have this kind of weird thing that we need to fix here. So let's address that next. There's a few ways that we could do this. One would be kind of using our clone stamp, kind of building this area out, right? So maybe we do that, and then maybe use this to add some skin, etc. But we can actually use Photoshop's AI to do some of this work for us. So if we just select this empty space here to maybe about there, and then kind of even give it some hair shape at the bottom, and then do generative fill. I'm going to leave the prompt blank, and let's see what Photoshop does to fill in that empty space. And you can see here, Photoshop has done kind of a really nice job there of figuring out what that might look like. So I'm going to use this first one. I think that looks good. And I'm pretty happy with that for the head. So now we need to do the hands. Now the problem is this hand is kind of hidden behind her, and I don't want that. So I'm going to take this cut up layer and go to Filter or Edit and Puppet Warp. And with the Puppet Warp, I'm going to add points where I don't want her to move. So I obviously don't want her neck to move. Don't want her arms to move. I don't want any of this stuff to move. So I'm going to add some points here just to make sure these things do not move. And then I'm going to add a point near her hand, kind of move that out to here. Maybe pull this in a little bit. So something like this. And it looks a bit bizarre, to be fair, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut out the hand from our original here, and then we'll work with that. So let's go ahead and go on to our pen tool. And here I want right around there. Oops. Right mouse click, make selection, shift. Actually, for this, I'm going to do Command J because I don't want to cut it out. I actually want to cut it out from this one. So here, I'm going to use just the erase brush here and just kind of erase her hand, but leave her wrist intact. That way I don't have two hands. So something like this. And then what I'm going to do is take this hand, this one that I've made, I'm going to turn off this original, and we're going to use this hand and place it on here and also make it bigger. So let's go ahead and make that bigger. And let's do it about 140, I would say. Whoops. And I need to make this blend in here. So I'm going to do Command T again, do the warp, just kind of pull in those edges there. And then what we could do here, if we wanted to, is use our same kind of blend with generative fill trick select this area here, and then do a generative fill. And that first one looks good. All right, and then let's do the next hand. So I'm going to go to the cut up layer. I'm going to go to my pen tool, select the hand, kind of where I want it to separate, so probably somewhere around here. Make selection, Shift Command J, Command T, put my anchor point there, and then make this 140. And then with the Command T again, I'm just going to pull these edges in so that this edge here lines up. And that looks good. All right, and then we need to do the shoes. So let's go ahead and do those. And I'll hold down, push down V, hold down Command, select that layer, P for the pen tool. And here, instead of the pant leg, we're looking at her ankle. This is the part that we don't want changed underneath our shoe. So the rest of the shoe right about there is what we want to select and make bigger. So right mouse click. We're going to do Shift Command J. And here I'm going to put it underneath the cutout layer and start making this bigger. We'll do about 135 here. And then move this down until it kind of lines up on the left there. And then with our warp, I'm just going to line this up here so we don't have any cut space between her ankle and the shoe, like so. And then let's go ahead and do this shoe. Pen tool. And here I'm going to stick pretty close to the shoe itself. So like this. Shift Command J, Command T for transform, kind of there. I know I want this to be 135, and then we'll go onto our warp. Actually, before I do warp, I want to rotate this just a little bit, and then I'll do warp and just bring in these edges so that her ankle is covered up. And then we can take all the layers that make up our character here, put them in a group, and call this subject. And now we can do Command T, shift her around, maybe put her a little straighter like this. And then here, this leg looks a little bit long. So for that, what I might do here is convert this to a smart object. And once it's a smart object, you can do a puppet warp on it. And here what I might do is just add some anchor points here and just kind of bring her leg up, make that a little bit shorter. So if you look at those cartoon characters, you'll see that they kind of have short legs. So something like this just looks a little bit more cartoony or comically proportioned. And then the last thing is we want to add just a little shadow on the ground again. I'm going to do kind of a soft shadow, so something like this. And I always like adding my shadow with a curved layer because then I can make it darker or lighter as I see fit. And also you can even use this feather for a quick and dirty shadow like that. Although in a shadow like this, they kind of spread out left and right. So that's why I like to use the motion blur. And we can do 2 of those and then a Gaussian blur to get a little bit less blurring at the top and the bottom. But something like that looks good. And then might move this down a little so she's jumping higher. And then maybe add even a little bit more feathering here as well. There you go. All right, and there you have it. So those are 3 different examples. As you can see, the steps are the same in each one. The first step is always separating your subject from your background, filling in the background so that you have a clean background plate, or replacing your background, depending on what you want to do. And then from there, you want to separate the head, hands, and shoes and make those bigger. And a cool trick is if you do need to show the neckline, like where that head connects to the neck, you can use a generative fill to help you kind of blend those two together. So there you have it. That's how you put together that cartoon style composite inside of Photoshop. And hopefully through this, you learn tips, tricks, and techniques that you can use in your own projects. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, I'd love if you could subscribe to my channel, leave a like, share this video. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I do answer them all. And finally, if you want more professional training for Photoshop or graphic design in general, check out nuclei.com. I sell professional training and assets for digital artists, graphic designers, and photographers using Photoshop. Otherwise, here are some other tutorials that you can check out. And I will see you next time.